All right, today we're doing an explainer on the president's recent comments about a potential deal for Greenland. It all came up during a press gaggle, and a few questions led to this whole description of what he called the Greenland concept. So we're going to unpack exactly what was said. Okay, so let's dive right in. The whole conversation got started because of a pretty unexpected comment from the president about some negotiations happening over Greenland. I mean, that one remark kicked off a whole series of questions from the press, who were all, trying to figure out what in the world he was talking about. And this is the quote that started it all. He just casually mentioned that Greenland is going very well, it's in negotiation. For a lot of people listening, this was brand new information. So naturally, the reporters jumped on it, and that's when they started asking about this Greenland concept. So what exactly is this concept? We're just going to go through the source material from that press gaggle and piece together the key things the president described when they asked him to elaborate. As the reporters kept pressing for more details, what started as just an idea of a deal started to get a lot more specific and unusual. The president started laying out some incredibly expansive terms that, well, you just don't see in a conventional agreement. The first thing he mentioned was a real head-turner. He said that unlike most deals, this one wouldn't have an expiration date. The time limit, in his exact words, was infinity. It's forever. And then there was the question of what the U.S. could actually do there. The description of that authority was, well, extremely broad. The president said we can do military, we can do anything we want. That suggests pretty much unlimited freedom to operate. He also made it pretty clear this wasn't just a two-way street. He said the deal would be good for Europe because, as he put it, we hold it all together. And then, and this is a big one, he added that NATO would also be involved. So what about the money? What's the price tag on a deal that's forever and lets you do anything you want? Well, when asked about the cost, the president's answer was simple. There's no price. That definitely suggested this wasn't some kind of normal purchase, which he then clarified in a very unique way. So how could there possibly be no price? Well, the president explained that there was one specific expense involved, and it's a pretty memorable feature that he described as being totally central to the plan: a golden dome. Yeah, he said the only real expense for the United States would be building this thing. He did mention that the U.S. would have participation in the cost of the dome, which kind of implies it might be a shared expense. So why a dome? What's it for? The way he described it was pretty straightforward. It's a way to have that piece of ice covered. He stressed that this would be a good thing for both the U.S. and for Europe, though he didn't really get into the specifics of how. At this point, you can imagine what the reporters were thinking, right? The practical questions started flying. Since Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark, they wanted to know if Denmark was even on board with any of this, and when they could expect to hear some more concrete details. So a reporter just cut right to the chase. Is Denmark on board with this concept? Which, let's be honest, is the heart of the matter. Any deal like this would absolutely need the Danish government to sign off on it. The president's response was pretty optimistic. He said, "I think everyone likes it." And then he gave a very specific timeline for a better answer, saying he'd let them know more in about 2 weeks. But they weren't quite done. Another reporter circled back, still trying to get a handle on what this concept actually is. They asked again for a timeline on when everyone could get more information, to really clarify the whole plan. And the answer was the same. He just said, we'll have something in 2 weeks. So he reiterated that same short-term timeline, which suggested, that things were actively in the works. Someone also asked how this whole idea would be different from the U.S. military presence that's already in Greenland. The president described it as much different. He said it would have much more detail and, maybe most importantly, that it would be a much more generous deal for the United States. All right, so after that whole back and forth, what are the big takeaways here? Let's just quickly pull together everything we learned from the president's own words about this Greenland concept. So to sum it all up, the deal, as it was described, is permanent, infinite. The U.S. gets to do anything we want. There's no price tag other than helping build a golden dome. NATO is involved, and more details were promised in about 2 weeks. And really, that's where we're left. We have a concept defined by these massive, sweeping terms and one very unique architectural centerpiece. It all really comes down to what happens next, and what this generous deal, as the president called it, actually turns into.